He smiled the moment he stepped outside, as if the world required it from him. It was a practiced smile, easy, familiar, almost automatic. The kind people trusted. The kind that made strangers comfortable and friends careless with their questions. When someone asked, "How are you?" the smile answered before his mouth did. "I'm good." And most days, that was enough to end the conversation. At work, he was known as the reliable one. Always on time. Always calm. Always willing to take on extra tasks when someone else looked tired. His co-workers joked that nothing ever stressed him out. They admired his patience, his quiet strength, his ability to stay positive no matter how heavy the workload became. If only they knew how much effort that positivity cost. He sat at his desk every day with his shoulders slightly tense, jaw clenched just enough to remind himself not to fall apart. Emails piled up. Deadlines crept closer. The numbers on his screen blurred sometimes, not because they were confusing, but because his mind wandered to places he didn't allow himself to visit during office hours. Regret had a way of doing that. During lunch breaks, he often ate alone, not because he disliked people, but because silence was easier than pretending for another hour. He would scroll through his phone, watching other lives unfold in carefully edited photos. Smiling faces. Celebrations. Success stories. Everyone seemed to be moving forward while he felt stuck, standing still under a weight no one else could see. Yet when someone sat across from him and asked if he was okay, he smiled again. Always the smile. At home, the smile slowly faded the moment the door closed behind him. The apartment was small and quiet, filled with the soft hum of a refrigerator and the ticking of a clock that seemed louder at night. Shoes by the door. A jacket hanging unused. A stack of unopened mail resting on the table like a silent accusation. Bills. He didn't open them right away. He already knew what they said. Money had become a constant shadow, following him into every room, whispering reminders of responsibilities he could barely manage. Rent. Utilities. Debts that felt older than his hope. He worked hard, but somehow it was never enough. No matter how carefully he planned, something always went wrong. He told himself it was temporary. That things would get better soon. He had been telling himself that for years. At night, he lay on his bed staring at the ceiling, replaying moments he wished he could erase. Words he never said. Chances he never took. Dreams he quietly buried because survival demanded more attention than ambition. Once, he wanted more from life. He remembered that version of himself, the one who believed effort guaranteed results, who thought kindness would always return, who trusted that doing the right thing mattered. Somewhere along the way, that belief cracked. Not all at once, but slowly, like glass under pressure. People didn't notice because he never let them. He learned early that vulnerability made others uncomfortable. When he tried to open up in the past, the responses were always the same: be strong. You'll get through it. Everyone struggles. So he stopped talking. Silence became safer than disappointment. Friends drifted away not out of cruelty, but because life moved faster than connections. Messages turned into occasional check-ins. Occasional check-ins turned into memories. Still, whenever they met, they praised him for handling everything so well. He smiled and nodded. If strength meant pretending, then he had mastered it. The mirror in the bathroom reflected a man who looked fine on the surface. No visible scars. No signs of damage. Just tired eyes that avoided their own reflection for too long. He rarely asked himself how he felt anymore. The answer scared him. Instead, he focused on getting through the day. Wake up. Smile. Work. Smile. Survive. Smile. Repeat. What hurt the most wasn't the pain itself, it was how invisible it had become. How normal suffering felt. How easy it was for the world to believe he was okay because he never gave it a reason to think otherwise. But beneath the smile, something was slowly breaking. A quiet exhaustion. A deep loneliness. A growing fear that this was all life would ever be. He didn't know it yet, but the smile everyone believed in was beginning to crack. And when it finally did, it wouldn't be in public, or at work, or in front of anyone who expected him to be strong. It would happen alone. On a night that would change everything. Morning arrived the same way it always did without asking if he was ready. The alarm rang, sharp and unforgiving, pulling him out of a sleep that never truly rested him. He lay still for a moment, staring at the wall, calculating how much energy he had left for the day. Not physically, he could manage that. It was the emotional cost that worried him. Every day demanded something from him, and every day he gave more than he could afford. Still, he got up. In the shower, warm water ran over his shoulders, but it didn't wash away the heaviness clinging to his chest. He leaned his head against the tile and closed his eyes, letting the sound drown out his thoughts. For a brief moment, there was nothing to perform, no one to impress, no smile to wear. Just him. But even that felt uncomfortable. He dressed quickly, choosing clothes that blended in, nothing loud, nothing noticeable. He didn't want attention. Attention invited questions, and questions required answers he didn't have the strength to give. Before leaving, he checked his phone. No missed calls. No new messages. A strange mix of relief and sadness settled in. Outside, the city moved around him, alive and indifferent. People rushed past with purpose, talking on phones, laughing, complaining. Everyone carried something, he knew that. Pain wasn't unique. Struggle wasn't special. That's what he told himself whenever he felt his own burden growing too heavy. Others have it worse. The phrase followed him everywhere. It kept him quiet. It kept him small. It convinced him that his feelings didn't deserve space, that his exhaustion was selfish, that asking for help would somehow take it away from someone more deserving. So he carried on. At work, the day unfolded like a script he had memorized long ago. Meetings, tasks, polite conversations. When mistakes happened, he took responsibility even when they weren't his. It was easier than explaining. Easier than conflict. Easier than being seen as weak. His manager once told him, "You're solid. We can always count on you." The words should have felt like praise. Instead, they felt like a sentence. Being dependable meant being silent. Being strong meant never breaking. He wondered if people would still value him if he ever admitted how close he was to the edge. Probably not, he thought. By afternoon, fatigue crept into his bones. Not the kind sleep could fix, the deeper kind that came from years of holding everything in. His chest felt tight, his thoughts slower. He stared at his screen, rereading the same line over and over, unable to focus. No one noticed. Why would they? He still smiled when spoken to. When the workday finally ended, he walked home instead of taking the bus. The longer route. He told himself it was for fresh air, but really, he just wasn't ready to face the quiet of his apartment yet. Silence had a way of amplifying everything he tried to ignore. As he walked, memories surfaced uninvited. Conversations that ended too soon. Promises he made to himself that he couldn't keep. People he disappointed, some intentionally, some without realizing it. He replayed them all, wondering where things went wrong, wondering if a different choice could have changed everything. The worst part was the feeling that he had wasted time. Years had passed, and he still felt like he was waiting for life to begin. At home, he dropped his keys on the table and sat on the edge of the couch without turning on the lights. Darkness felt honest. There was no need to pretend in the dark. He rubbed his face with both hands, pressing his palms against his eyes as if he could push the thoughts back inside his head. He thought about calling someone. The idea lasted only a few seconds. Who would he call? And what would he say? Hey, I'm not okay felt too heavy. I'm tired felt too small. I don't know how much longer I can do this felt terrifying. So he didn't call anyone. Instead, he made dinner he barely tasted and scrolled through his phone until his eyes hurt. Time passed without meaning. Hours slipped by unnoticed. When night finally settled in, the weight returned stronger than before. Lying in bed, he felt it pressing down on him, expectations, fears, unanswered questions. His heart raced for no clear reason. His mind refused to slow down. He stared at the ceiling again, counting breaths, trying to calm himself the way he had learned to do when things got overwhelming. This was the part no one saw. The quiet battles. The sleepless nights. The constant effort it took just to feel normal. He wondered how long a person could carry so much without collapsing. He wondered if anyone would notice if he finally put the weight down. Tomorrow, he knew, he would wake up and smile again. But somewhere deep inside him, something was shifting. The silence was becoming harder to maintain. The weight heavier. The belief that he could keep going like this forever was slowly fading. And the night that would force him to face it all was getting closer. The power went out just after midnight. At first, he thought it was a simple blackout, one of those brief interruptions that the city occasionally experienced. But as the minutes stretched, the realization settled like ice in his chest. The world outside his apartment had vanished into darkness, and so had the safety of distraction. No hum of electronics. No artificial light to soften the edges of reality. Just silence. He sat on the edge of his bed, knees drawn to his chest, staring at the faint shadows the moon cast through the window. For the first time in months, maybe years, he had nowhere to hide. The constant hum of life, the daily routine that allowed him to function without truly feeling, was gone. And suddenly, the silence became unbearable. The mask he wore for so long, the practiced smile, the calm demeanor, the careful words crumbled in the absence of noise. Thoughts he had buried deep down clawed their way to the surface, demanding attention. Memories he had avoided surfaced like unwanted guests. Arguments he never resolved. Opportunities he never took. Regrets that weighed heavier with each passing year. Faces of people he had loved and lost. Faces of people he had disappointed, whether he intended to or not. He tried to push them away at first. He told himself to breathe, to calm down. He counted in his head, a technique he had learned long ago. 5, 10, 20. But the numbers didn't help. They only reminded him of how little control he had over the storm inside. And then, the tears came. Slow at first, almost tentative, as if his body didn't quite believe it was allowed to release them. Then faster. Hot streaks against cold skin. Silent sobs that racked his chest. The kind of sobs that had no sound in a dark, empty room, but carried a weight that no one else would ever hear. He cried for the years he had spent pretending. For the loneliness he had carried in silence. For the exhaustion that never truly left. For the moments he had hidden from himself and the moments he would never get back. It was terrifying. And strangely liberating. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't performing. He didn't smile for anyone. He didn't carry the weight of others' expectations. He didn't pretend that he could manage it all alone. He let himself feel it. All of it. Minutes felt like hours. Hours felt like an eternity. And when he finally lay back against the wall, chest heaving, something had changed. He realized, with painful clarity, that he could no longer survive by pretending. The thought scared him. More than anything else had in years. But in that fear, there was also a strange kind of truth. He couldn't keep living like this, not really. The smile he wore so convincingly, the quiet strength he projected to the world, the self-reliance that had been his armor, they were no longer enough. He was exhausted. Broken in ways he had ignored for too long. And yet, for the first time, he could admit it to himself, if not to the world. The night stretched on, heavy and unyielding. The darkness was complete. The apartment, usually a sanctuary of solitude, felt like a mirror showing him who he really was beneath the mask. Somewhere deep inside, a spark ignited. Not a bright, blinding flame. Just a tiny flicker. The realization that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to carry everything alone forever. And for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to hope. Because that night, the night that fell apart, was also the night that could begin to put him back together. The morning light was weak, spilling pale and uncertain through the blinds. The city outside moved as if nothing had happened, indifferent to the storm he had endured in the dark. But inside, something had shifted. He didn't wake up with the practiced smile. There was no pretending, no quick mask of composure to greet the day. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor, tracing cracks in the wood with his eyes, feeling the weight of the previous night still pressing on his chest. He thought about calling someone. The idea came suddenly, as if a voice from the night whispered it into existence. But it wasn't easy. Fear gripped him like a vice. What would they think? Would they care? Would it make him seem weak? The answers didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that he needed to speak. Needed to let someone in. He reached for his phone. Fingers hovered over the screen. One name. Just one. Not a therapist. Not a friend from work. Just one person who had once mattered enough to be trusted. Someone who might understand or at least not judge. He typed a simple message, hands trembling. I need to talk. Can you listen? Then he stared at it for a long moment before pressing send. Minutes passed. The silence was unbearable. His heart raced. Doubts gnawed at him. But then, a reply came. I'm here. Tell me what's going on. He exhaled, a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. And then he began. Not in a polished way. Not with practiced words. Just truth. He told them about the weight he carried. About the bills, the loneliness, the sleepless nights. About how he had hidden behind smiles for so long that even he forgot what real happiness felt like. About the fear that one day, the cracks would be too big to hide. It wasn't easy. His voice shook. Tears returned as he spoke. But this time, there was no shame. Only release. The other person didn't interrupt. Didn't offer clichés. They listened. They acknowledged his pain. They reminded him he wasn't alone. And in that listening, he found something he hadn't felt in years, a small, fragile sense of hope. It didn't fix everything. The bills were still there. The memories still haunted him. The pressures of life hadn't disappeared overnight. But something essential had changed. He had taken the first step. And sometimes, that's all healing needs, a single step toward being seen, toward being heard, toward being human without apology. He spent the rest of the day differently. Tasks still demanded attention, but the burden felt lighter. He still smiled at co-workers and acquaintances, but it was different now, less armor, more cautious optimism. For the first time, his smiles were sometimes honest. He realized strength wasn't about hiding pain. It wasn't about bearing it alone. Strength was choosing to face it, even when it scared him, even when no one else noticed. That night, he sat on his balcony, looking at the stars, feeling the cool breeze on his face. The darkness no longer felt suffocating. It felt like a reminder of the night he had survived, the night he had finally let himself be human. The choice no one saw, the choice to reach out, to speak, to begin the slow process of healing had already changed him. And deep down, he knew that when the cracks in his smile appeared again, he could face them. Not alone, not hidden, but with the courage to be real. For the first time in a long time, he felt the possibility of tomorrow. Weeks passed, slow but steady. The nights no longer felt like prisons of silence. He had learned that opening up didn't have to be terrifying, that speaking his truth didn't make him weak, and that the world could bear the weight of his honesty as long as he let it. His days began differently. He no longer woke with a tightness in his chest that demanded immediate suppression. Instead, he took moments to breathe, to acknowledge himself, to remind himself that surviving wasn't a failure, it was proof of resilience. The bills were still there. Responsibilities still piled up. Life didn't suddenly become easy. But something had changed in how he carried it all. The weight was still present, yes, but now he knew he didn't have to shoulder it alone. At work, people noticed the subtle shift. His calm remained, but it no longer carried the undercurrent of desperation. He laughed, yes, but this time, it wasn't a mask. There were still quiet moments of reflection, moments of solitude, but they were chosen, not forced. And when he smiled now, it meant something. It was no longer a shield for the world, it was a bridge. A sign that he could survive, that he could feel, and that he could be seen without pretense. One evening, he walked through the park near his apartment, watching children run freely, couples hold hands, old friends greet each other with warmth. He felt the sun on his face, the gentle breeze in his hair, and he realized he was finally present in his own life. The night that had once broken him now felt like a turning point. That night had forced him to confront the truth he had avoided for too long. And in facing it, he had discovered something extraordinary. Strength wasn't the absence of pain. Strength was embracing it, acknowledging it, and choosing to move forward anyway. He smiled again, softly this time, as he walked home. Not for anyone else. Not as armor. But for himself. Because he had survived the darkness, and now he knew, even in the hardest nights, the human spirit has a way of finding light. And that smile, once a mask, once a performance, was now real. It was a smile that spoke of resilience. A smile that carried hope. A smile that finally meant something. For the first time in a long time, he didn't just exist. He lived.